Marissa won't let me change my mind. My husband Robert said that to his 15-year-old daughter while I stood right behind him, close enough to touch his shoulder. For 1 second I thought I heard it wrong. Then Grace turned and looked straight at me, and I knew I had heard it just fine. 4 days before, Robert had grounded her for 6 weeks after she snuck off to a lake party and lied about where she'd gone. It was his rule, his words. I even told him it felt too long. And now, somehow, it had become my rule to break. I laughed. Not because anything was funny. It was the kind of laugh that comes out when you finally see a pattern you spent years pretending not to see. "You really didn't learn, did you?" said. Robert's face went pale. "Marissa," he started. I didn't wait for the rest. I slid my wedding ring off my finger and set it down on the porch railing between us. Grace stopped crying. Robert stared at the ring like it might jump up and explain itself. "Come on," he whispered. "No, Robert," I said. "Not this time." 4 days earlier, our house had felt completely different. It was a Friday night in September, warm enough for the windows to stay open. Grace was 15, Robert was 45, and I was 42. Grace had asked to camp in the backyard with 2 friends, and we'd said yes. Tents, flashlights, a small fire pit, nothing unusual. Around midnight, Robert went out to check on them and found the tents empty. The girls had climbed the back fence and walked 2 miles to a bonfire party by the lake. Robert paced the kitchen for almost an hour before headlights hit the driveway. Grace came in laughing with her friends, and the laughing stopped the second she saw her father's face. "Where were you?" "Just walking around." "Don't lie to me." Eventually the truth came out. The party, the older boys, the 2 miles home in the dark with no phone charged. Robert had already buried people he loved unexpectedly before. Fear turned into anger fast. "You're grounded for 6 weeks, he said the next morning. "No phone, no friends, no exceptions." Grace looked at me like I might step in and save her. I didn't. Later, alone with Robert, I said, 6 weeks feels like a lot for one bad night. "She lied to us, Marissa." "I know. I'm not saying no punishment. I'm saying 6 weeks is steep. There have to be real consequences." He was her father. He'd been raising her since she was 7, long before I ever walked into their kitchen. So I let it go, and I backed him in front of Grace, even though part of me disagreed. Then the school talent show came up. Grace had been practicing a dance routine for months with her best friend, rehearsing in the garage every evening after homework. The show was in 5 days, right in the middle of her punishment. She begged Robert to let her go, just for that one night. He said no. She asked again the next day. Then she said the words that always seemed to reach something deep inside him. "Mom would have let me go." Robert went quiet. Grace's mother, Ellen, had died 6 years earlier. That evening, I found Robert sitting on the edge of our bed, staring at his hands. "Maybe the talent show should be different," he said. "You mean make an exception?" "It's one night, Marissa. She's worked so hard for it." I sat beside him. "Robert, I was the one who said 6 weeks felt too long. If you want to shorten it, that's fine. But you tell her that's your choice. Don't put my name on it." He nodded slowly. "You're right. I'm sorry." I believed him completely. That was always the hardest part with Robert. He usually meant it. The next afternoon, I heard Grace try again from the hallway. "Dad, please, everyone's going to be there." "I already told you, Grace, the rule stands." "Then why can't you just bend it once?" A long pause followed, heavy with everything neither of them wanted to say out loud. Then Robert said the sentence that ended everything. "Marissa won't let me change my mind." And something inside me, something I'd been holding steady for years, finally went still and quiet, like a held breath finally let go. If Robert had been unkind, maybe I would have understood our marriage sooner and left long before this. But he wasn't unkind. He never raised his voice at me. He never lied about money or other women. In fact, years before I wore his ring, I learned something about him that convinced me I had finally found a good steady man. Robert had been married once before, to a woman named Ellen, and when she got sick with a serious heart condition. He stayed by her side through every single hard year. I didn't hear that story from Robert first. I heard it from his brother David, at a backyard barbecue about 6 months into our dating. David nodded toward Robert, who was flipping burgers and laughing with a neighbor. "He's always been the one who stays," David said. Then he told me what those 2 years had really looked like. The weekly hospital drives, the medication charts taped to the fridge, the nights Robert slept sitting up in a hospital chair so Ellen wouldn't wake up alone. Ellen died when Grace was 7 years old. Robert had cooked every meal around her strict diet, learned to give her injections without flinching, and never once complained where anyone could hear him. David told me. He loved her completely right up to the end. Sitting there with a paper plate on my knees, I thought about my own first marriage, where my ex-husband had once complained about dinner being late while I sat in a hospital waiting room with my sick father. Robert felt like proof that gentler men existed. What I didn't understand yet was that Grace had watched those same 2 years through a child's eyes. She'd watched her father hold her mother's hand through every treatment. She'd watched him promise, over and over, that nothing would ever come before his daughter. Then Ellen died, and Grace became the only piece of that promise still standing. 3 years later I arrived. By the time Robert and I married, Grace was 12, and I knew better than to walk into that house pretending to replace anyone. I never asked Grace to call me Mom. I never touched Ellen's photographs on the hallway wall. I learned how Grace liked her pancakes. I offered rides to practice, and if she said no, I didn't push. Some days were genuinely good. We baked cookies together once, and she laughed so hard at my crooked frosting that she had to sit down. Other days were harder. If I made a mistake, it became, "Mom never did it that way." I kept adjusting, kept giving it time, kept believing patience would eventually be enough. The first real crack showed itself when Grace was 13. I reminded her about homework before a sleepover and she snapped, "You're not my mom." I looked at Robert, waiting for him to back me up. Instead he sighed and said, "Marissa, she's still grieving. Give her space." So I did. What I didn't know was that later in private, Robert wasn't just asking Grace for patience with me. He was quietly teaching her that I was the one who didn't understand their family, without ever meaning to. I found this out fully in a school parking lot when Grace was 13, waiting for a ride Robert couldn't give because of a late meeting. When I picked her up instead, she was already annoyed. Dad was supposed to get me. He got stuck at work, so I came instead. She turned toward the window and muttered, "Whatever. You don't get it anyway. Dad says you never raised a real teenager, so you don't understand stuff like this." I kept my eyes on the road and said nothing, but it stung more than I expected. That night I asked Robert about it directly. "I didn't say you don't understand kids," he said, surprised I was hurt. "I said you haven't raised a teenager. That's just true. Then why does it always turn into Marissa doesn't get it, whenever she's upset with me?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "She gets frustrated. I'm trying to help her understand you're adjusting too." I sat with that a long moment. He wasn't lying. He also wasn't seeing what he was doing, and neither, honestly, was I yet. Life moved on in ordinary ways after that. School mornings, dentist visits, birthday dinners, Sunday pancakes. Grace joined the school choir, and I sat beside Robert at every concert, clapping loudly, never needing to be first in line for a hug afterward. There were sweet moments too. Grace once spent an hour helping me pick shoes for a wedding we were attending. She told me about a fight with her best friend, and I just listened without giving advice unless she asked. Those good moments made the bad ones sting harder. By our 2nd year of marriage, I noticed something I couldn't unsee. Whenever Grace and I disagreed about anything, Robert never seemed to ask, "What's fair here?" He asked, "Who can handle being upset with me the least?" Grace was young, still grieving, likely to cry or slam a door. I was the calm one, the one who would understand eventually. So I was the one who usually bent. One night, after I changed weekend plans for the 3rd time to keep the peace, Robert kissed my forehead and said, "Thank you for always understanding." Lying awake that night, Those words kept circling in my head. Always understanding. There was always peace afterward, sure. Grace calmed down, the house went quiet, Robert relaxed. But I stayed awake, turning it over. Robert wasn't solving the conflict. He was simply moving it every single time onto me, the person least likely to punish him for it. Once I noticed that pattern, I couldn't stop noticing it, and a few months later, a small moment in the garage confirmed everything I feared. Grace, then 14, asked to ride to a concert with a boy from school whose driving record worried Robert. Robert said no immediately, clearly on his own, before I'd even spoken. I agreed with him fully. Case closed, I thought. But days later I found Grace in the hallway, furious, saying, "Dad said you both decided together, but I bet it was really you." I found Robert in the garage sorting old tools. "Did you tell her I said no first?" He hesitated 2 full seconds. That was answer enough. "What does it matter, Marissa?" We agreed. "It matters because now she only remembers my no, not yours." He set down his wrench, frustrated, and I laid out example after example. Plans I had rearranged, rules he had quietly softened while I got blamed for enforcing them. He grew quiet, then finally admitted the truth underneath it all. After Ellen died, Grace had asked him constantly if he would leave too, if he would replace her mother. He'd promised her she would always come first, no matter what. "When I fell for you," he said, sitting on the garage bench, "that promise got tangled with guilt. I was terrified she'd think I chose you over her." For the first time, I saw real fear behind his choices, not cruelty. "I have never once asked you to choose me over your daughter," I said. "I know. But every time I'm scared she'll think I did. I somehow make sure you look like the reason instead of me." He wiped his eyes. "I've been putting things on you that were mine to carry. I'm sorry." For months after that, Robert genuinely changed. When Grace pushed back on a shared decision, he owned it fully. "That's my rule, not Marissa's." She slammed doors sometimes, stormed upstairs, and came down for dinner an hour later like nothing happened. The house felt more honest. I stopped being the automatic villain standing between father and daughter. I let myself believe the hardest part of our marriage was finally behind us. Then came the camping trip, the 6-week grounding, and the talent show that broke the promise all over again. Back on the porch, ring resting on the railing, Robert asked quietly, "So what are you saying?" I looked at this good, gentle, frightened man and finally asked myself the real question. Not whether he loved me because he did, and not whether he was kind because he was. The real question was whether I could keep living as the place his fear landed every time it got too heavy for him to carry alone. And for the first time I already knew my answer. "I'm saying I can't keep doing this." We separated quietly that fall. No screaming matches, no fight over furniture. Robert apologized without excuses, and I believe every word was true in the moment he said it. But I had already given him the chance to change, and he had changed, right up until the pressure got heavy again. The pattern always won under pressure. Months later, alone in a small apartment with tea going cold on the counter, I touched the bare spot on my finger and cried. Then I noticed something surprising underneath the grief. I could finally breathe. 2 years later, I walked into a bookstore cafe with my new husband, a quiet, steady man who owned his mistakes without needing anyone else to carry them. Behind the counter, a young woman looked up, and I knew those eyes instantly. "Marissa." It was Grace, 17 now, taller, softer around the edges. We talked, awkward at first, then easier. "Before I left," she said, "I know now it was never really you. I'm sorry I let you take the blame for so long." I hugged her, and for the first time in years, it didn't hurt at all. A home isn't peaceful because no one ever gets upset in it. It's peaceful because no one has to disappear just to keep it that way.